Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into some seriously mind-bending source material that is going to completely reimagine how we look at space-time, physics, and literally reality itself. We are unpacking a theoretical framework known as Conspansive Duality. Yeah, it's a heavy subject, but as we break these concepts down today, we're going to make it totally accessible and absolutely fascinating. Seriously, prepare to have your perspective of the cosmos completely flipped inside out. So I want you to start by just pondering a pretty radical question. Is the universe expanding outward, or are its contents actually shrinking inward, right? Standard cosmology tells us the universe is blowing up like a balloon. But according to the fascinating text we're analyzing today, from a strictly logical and mathematical standpoint, those two scenarios, an outwardly expanding universe and an inwardly shrinking one, might actually be completely indistinguishable from one another.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover the expanding universe problem, then the mathematical fraction analogy, followed by the Venn diagram of spacetime. After that, we'll pit ERCU versus USRE, and finally wrap it all up with solving cosmic mysteries.
All right, part one, the expanding universe problem.
To really grasp the critique here, we first got to define the standard model. The text calls this ERSU, which stands for the expanding rubber sheet universe. And honestly, this is exactly how you and I are usually taught to picture the cosmos. Just imagine a giant rubber sheet stretching outward into the void. On that sheet, you've got galaxies, stars, planets. Now, as the sheet stretches, the empty space between the objects grows, but the objects themselves stay the exact same, invariant size. The text calls this ectomorphic expansion, meaning it's the outside shape that's changing.
But there's a huge logical flaw with that mainstream ERSU model. If the universe is expanding outward, what exactly is it expanding into? Outward motion fundamentally requires a fixed background space to contain it. But then you have to ask, well, what contains that background space? And what contains that? The source argues this creates an infinite tower of turtles. It's a philosophical paradox where you suddenly require an endless chain of unexplained containers. It is a major conceptual dead end.
Which brings us to section 2, the mathematical fraction analogy. And this brilliant analogy illustrates the solution just perfectly. Think about it. 1/2 is exactly equal to 1,000 over 2,000. You could multiply the numerator and denominator by 10 to the power of 9,999, and the actual intrinsic value of that fraction doesn't change one single bit. It's completely independent of the size of the multiplier. The relationship, that proportion between the top and the bottom, remains identical.
By connecting that simple fraction math to the universe, the text makes a really profound leap. Look, the universe is a self-contained system. There is no external ruler, no giant tape measure sitting outside of it to judge its total size. Therefore, just like multiplying our fraction, the container expanding outward and the contents shrinking inward are proportionally the exact same thing. Because reality lacks an external dimension, you literally cannot geometrically distinguish between a universe that's expanding and a universe that's staying still while everything inside it shrinks. And this equivalence right here is what the text calls conspansive duality.
Moving right along to section 3, the Venn diagram of spacetime. Let's walk through this process, which the author calls conspansion. Instead of viewing the universe as just a grid of moving physical particles, imagine it more like a massive dynamic Venn diagram. Step 1. These circles don't represent solid matter, but rather event potentials. Step 2. These circles inter-expand and actually interpenetrate one another across space. And step 3. When objects interact, like say a photon hitting your retina, those overlapping circles collapse to points to create entirely new events. So objects aren't just rolling along world lines, they're constantly expanding potentials that overlap and collapse into new physical realities.
To really grasp how that works, we need to define a crucial piece of jargon from the text, nomological syntax. Now, nomological basically just means relating to the laws of physics, and syntax means rules of grammar or logic. The text argues that the potential instantiations of physical law actually reside inside the objects themselves. Objects aren't just dumb chunks of matter aimlessly bumping into each other. They're syntactic operators. They carry the actual rules of the universe right inside their very structure as they interact.
And that brings us to a massive paradigm shift. The old standard model relies on geometrodynamic evolution, the idea of a moving physical geometry, kind of like billiard balls rolling around on a stretched rubber table. But this text asserts that spacetime actually undergoes linguistic evolution.
It evolves like a language undergoing logical substitution. Reality isn't just physically moving, it's a self-contained system logically rewriting its own internal state over and over, substituting new events for old ones.
Let's see how this builds in Section 4. ERSU versus USRE. Okay, so we already know ERSU, the expanding rubber sheet universe. Now we meet its exact opposite, USRE, which stands for the universe as a self-representational entity. And yes, you guessed it, USRE is literally ERSU spelled backwards. In this USR paradigm, the universe's total size is totally invariant. It never, ever changes. Instead, to maintain that mathematical duality we just talked about, every single object inside the universe shrinks in mutual proportion. To really solidify the shift here, let's compare them side by side. Think about structure. ERSU is just a topological geometric point set, while USRE is a self-descriptive language. As for dynamics, ERSU expands outwardly, whereas in USRE, the universe is a static container where the objects shrink inwardly. And look at time. In ERSU, time is just a continuous, flowing duration. But in USRE, time is purely an ordinal relationship, a sequence of one static Venn diagram circle nested inside another. The text points out that inside these circles, duration is essentially meaningless. Time only exists as the sequence of those logical substitutions. Now you're probably wondering, if everything is constantly shrinking, why don't we notice it? Why doesn't physics just completely break down? Well, the text explains that under conspansive duality, general covariance, the requirement that the laws of physics are the same for all observers, is perfectly preserved. Because the universe itself plays the role of the fixed invariant, everything inside it is re-quantized or resized together at a global standard rate. Since we're shrinking at the exact same constant rescaling factor as the atoms in our bodies, the earth under our feet, and the stars in the sky, we simply perceive it as the universe expanding away from us. Trippy, right?
Which leads us to the big payoff in Section 5, solving cosmic mysteries.
So the crucial takeaway here is that adopting this bizarre shrinking model actually neatly resolves some major cosmological headaches. First, as we covered, it completely avoids that Tower of Turtles problem, because a static universe obviously doesn't need an external background space to expand into. Second, it explains the irreversible arrow of time. Because new Venn circles nest inside older ones, the whole process just physically can't run backwards. Third, it provides relief for quantum non-locality, that spooky action at a distance, because these event circles are structurally self-distributed. And finally, it explains the illusion of an accelerating universe.
I really want to highlight this profound quote directly from the text. It reads, "At the same time, conspansion gives the quantum wave function of objects a new home, inside the conspanding objects themselves." The author makes the case that in the standard ERSU model, when you divorce physical geometry from logic, quantum mechanics is basically left homeless. The probabilities have nowhere to actually physically live. But by treating objects as syntactic operators that carry the laws of physics inside them, conspansion finally gives the quantum wave function a logical place to exist.
And what about dark energy? Mainstream science is completely baffled as to why the expansion of the universe appears to be accelerating. But the text proposes a stunningly simple mathematical answer for this. Because the internal rate of shrinkage is a constant function applied to a constantly changing size ratio between the universe and its contents, it creates a massive optical illusion. From our internal vantage point, locked inside the shrinking contents, the universe only appears to be accelerating its expansion. That mysterious positive cosmological constant? It's just the conspansive dual of this internal geometry.
Which brings us to a frankly staggering philosophical question to end on. The text refers to this entire system as an infocognitive monism, a reality where syntax and physical state constantly alternate in a process it calls telic recursion. If that's true, if the universe is fundamentally a linguistic self-descriptive system, are we not just physical beings, but literally language processors interpreting the grammar of the cosmos from the inside out? It is a heavy, beautiful thought to leave you with. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the universe around you.